the chapter is John. The courtyard rang to the Song of Swords. Under black wool, boiled leather and mail, sweat trickled icily down John's chest, and he pressed the attack. Gren tumbled backwards, defending himself clumsily. When he raised his sword, John went underneath it with a sweeping blow that crunched against the back of the other boy's leg and sent him staggering. Gren's downcut was answered by an overhand that dented his helm. When he tried a side swing, John stepped aside his blade and slammed a mailed forearm onto his chest. Gren lost his footing and sat down hard in the snow. John knocked his sword from his fingers with a slash to his wrist that brought a cry of pain. Enough! Sir Alistair Thorne had a voice with an edge like Valyrian steel. Gren cradled his hand. The bastard broke my wrist. The bastard hamstrung you, opened your empty skull and cut off your hand, or would have, if those blades had an edge. It's fortunate for you that the watch needs stable boys as well as rangers. Sir Alistair gestured at Jeren and Toad. Get the Oryx on his feet. He has funeral arrangements to make. John took off his helm as the other boys were pulling Gren to his feet. The frosty morning air felt good on his face. He leaned on his sword, drew a deep breath, and allowed himself a moment to savour the victory. That is a long sword, not an old man's cane, Sir Alistair said sharply. Are your legs hurting, Lord Snow? John hated that name, a mockery that Sir Alistair had hung on him the first day he came to practice. The boys had picked up on it, and now he heard it everywhere. He slid the longsword back into its scabbard. No, he replied. Thorne strode towards him, crisp black leathers whispering faintly as he moved. He was a compact man of 50 years, spare and hard, with grey eyes in his black hair, hard with grey in his black hair and eyes like chips of onyx. The truth now, he commanded. I'm tired, John admitted. His arm burned from the weight of his longsword, and he had started to feel his bruises now, after the fight was done. What you are is weak. I won. No, the Oryx lost. One of the other boys snickered. John knew better than to reply. He had beaten every one that Sir Alistair had sent against him, yet it gained him nothing. The master-at-arms served only derision. Thorne hated him, John had decided. Of course, he hated the other boys even worse. That will be all, Thorne told them. I can only stomach so much ineptitude for one day. If the others ever come for us, I pray they have archers, because you lot are fit for nothing more than an arrow. John followed the rest back to the armoury, walking alone. He often walked alone here. There were almost 20 in the group he trained with, yet none he could call a friend. Most were 2 or 3 years his senior, yet none was half the fighter Robb had been at 14. Darion was quick, but afraid to be hit. Pip used his sword like a dagger. Jeren was as weak as a girl. Gren, slow and clumsy. Halder's blows were brutally hard, but he ran right into your attacks. The more time he spent with them, the more John despised them. Inside, John hung sword and scabbard from a hook in the stone wall, ignoring the others around him. Methodically, he began to strip off his mail, leather, and sweat-soaked woolens. Chunks of coal burned in iron braziers at either end of the long room, but John found himself shivering. The chill was always with him here. In the few years, he would forget what it was like to be warm. The weariness came on him suddenly as he donned the rough-spun blacks that was their everyday wear. He sat on the bench, his fingers fumbling with the fastenings on his cloak. So cold, he thought, remembering the warm halls of Winterfell, where the hot waters ran through the walls like blood through a man's body. There was scant warmth to be found in Castle Black. The walls were cold here, and the people colder. No one told him the Night's Watch would be like this. No one except Tyrion Lannister. The dwarf had given him the truth on the road north, but by then it had been too late. Jon wondered if his father had known what the wall would be like. He must have, he thought, which only made it hurt worse. Even his uncle had abandoned him in the cold place at the end of the world. Up here, the genial Benjen Stark that he'd known became a different person. He was First Ranger, and he spent his days and nights with the Lord Commander Mormont and Maester Aemon and the other high officials, while Jon was given over to the less than tender charge of Sir Alistair Thorne. 3 days after his arrival, Jon had heard that Benjen Stark was to lead a dozen men on the ranging into the haunted forest. That night, he sought out his uncle in the great timbered common hall and pleaded to go with him. Benjen refused him curtly. "This is not Winterfell," he told him as he cut his meat with fork and dagger. "On the wall, a man gets only what he earns. You're no ranger, Jon, only a green boy with the smell of summer still on you." Stupidly, Jon argued. "I'll be 15 on my name day," he said, almost a grown man. Benjen Stark frowned. "A boy you are, and a boy you'll remain, until Sir Alistair says that you're fit to be a man of the Night's Watch. If you thought your Stark blood would win you easy favours, then you're wrong. We put aside our old families, and we swear our vows. Your father will always have a place in my heart, but these are my brothers. Now." He gestured with his dagger at all the men around him, all the hard, cold men in black. Jon rose at dawn the next day to watch his uncle leave. One of his rangers, a big, ugly man, sang a bawdy song as he saddled his garron, his breath steaming in the cold morning air. Benjen Stark smiled at that, but he had no smile for his nephew. "How often must I tell you no, Jon? We'll speak when I return." As he watched his uncle lead his horse to the tunnel, Jon had remembered the things that Tyrion Lannister had told him on the King's Road, and in his mind's eye he saw Benjen Stark lying dead, his blood red on the snow. The thought made him sick. What was he becoming? Afterward, he sought out Ghost in the loneliness of his cell and buried his face in his thick white fur. If he must be alone, he would make solitude his armour. Castle Black had no godswood, only a small sept and a drunken septon, but Jon could not find him to pray to any god, could not find it in him to pray to any gods, old or new. If they were real, he thought, they would be as cruel and implacable as winter. Implacable. He missed his true brothers. Little Rickon, bright eyes shining as he begged for a sweet. Robb, his rival and his best friend and constant companion. Bran, stubborn and curious, always wanting to follow and join in whatever Robb and Jon were doing. He missed the girls too, even Sansa, who never called him anything but "my half-brother," since she was old enough to understand what bastard meant. And Arya, he missed her more than Robb, skinny little thing that she was, all scraped knees and tangled hair and torn clothes, so fierce and wilful. Arya never seemed to fit, no more than he had. Yet she could always make Jon smile. He would give anything to be with her now, to muss up her hair once more, and watch her make a face, and hear her finish a sentence with him. "You broke my wrist, bastard boy." Jon lifted his eyes at the sullen voice. Gren loomed over him, thick of neck, red of face, with 3 of his friends behind him. He knew Todder, a short, ugly boy with an unpleasant voice. The recruits called him Toad. The other 2 were ones Yoren had brought north with them, Jon remembered, reapers taken down in the fingers. He'd forgotten their names. They hardly ever spoke to him. Or he hardly ever spoke to them if he could help it. They were brutes and bullies, without a thimble of honour between them. John stood up. I'll break your other one for you if you ask nicely. Gren was 16 and a head taller than John. All four of them were bigger than he was, but they did not scare him. He'd beaten every one of them in the yard. Maybe we'll break you, one of the rapers said. Try. John reached back for his sword, but one of them grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. You made us look bad, complained Toad. You looked bad before I ever met you, John told him. The boy had his arm jerked upwards on him, hard. Pain lanced through him, but John would not cry out. Toad stepped close. The little lordling has a mouth on him, he said. He had pig eyes, small and shiny. Is that your mummy's mouth, bastard? What was she, some whore? Tell us her name. Maybe I had her a time or two. He laughed. John twisted like an eel and slammed a heel down across the instep of the boy holding him. There was a sudden cry of pain, and he was free. He flew at Toad, knocked him backward over a bench, and landed on his chest, both hands on his throat, slamming his head against the packed earth. The two from the fingers pulled him off, throwing him roughly to the ground. Gren began to kick him. John was rolling away from the blows when a booming voice cut through the gloom of the armory. Stop this now! John pulled himself to his feet. Donal Noy, who glowered at them. The yard is for fighting, the armourer said. Keep your quarrels out of my armoury, or I'll make them my quarrel. You won't like that. Toad sat on the floor, gingerly feeling the back of his head. His fingers came away bloody. He tried to kill me. It's true, I saw it, one of the rapers put in. He broke my wrist, Gren said again, holding it out to Noy for inspection. The armourer gave the offered wrist the briefest of glances. A bruise, perhaps a sprain. Mr. Eamon will give you a salve. Go with him. Totter that head wants looking at. The rest of you return to your cells. Not you, Snow. You stay. John sat heavily on the long wooden bench as the others left, oblivious to the looks they gave him, the silent promises of future retribution. His arm was throbbing. The watch has need of every man it can get, Donal Noy said when they were alone. Even men like Toad. You won't win any honours killing him. John's anger flared. He said my mother was a whore. I heard him. What of it? Lord Eddard Stark was not a man to sleep with whores, John said icily. His honour did not prevent him from fathering a bastard, did it? John was cold with rage. Can I go? You'll go when I tell you to go. John stared sullenly at the smoke rising from the brazier until Noy took him under the chin, thick fingers twisting his head around. Look at me when I'm talking to you, boy. John looked. The armourer had a chest like a keg of ale, a gut to match. His nose was flat and broad, and he always seemed in need of a shave. His left sleeve of his black wool tunic was fastened at the shoulder with a silver pin in the shape of a long sword. Words won't make your mother a whore. She was what she was, and nothing Toad says can change that. You know, we have men on the wall whose mothers were whores. Not my mother, John thought stubbornly, but he knew nothing of his mother. Eddard Stark would not talk of her, yet he dreamed of her at times, so often that he could almost see her face. In his dreams she was beautiful and high-born, and her eyes were kind. You think you had it hard, being a High Lord's bastard? The armourer went on. That boy Gerrans is a Septon's get, and Cotter Pike is the base-born son of a tavern wench, now commands the East Watch by the sea. I don't care, John said. I don't care about them. I don't care about you or Thorn or Benjamin Stark or any of it. I hate it here. It's too cold. Yes, cold and hard and mean. That's the wall, and the men who walk it. Not like the stories your wet nurse told you. Well, piss on the stories, and piss on your wet nurse. This is the way it is, and this is your life, same as the rest of us. Life, John repeated bitterly. The armor could talk about life. He'd had one. He'd only been taken to the Black after he'd lost an arm at the siege of Storm's End. Before that, he'd smithed for Stannis Baratheon, the king's brother. He'd seen the Seven Kingdoms from one end to the other. He'd feasted and quenched and fought in 100 battles. They said it was Donal Noye who forged King Robert's warhammer, the one that crushed the life from Rhaegar Targaryen on the trident. He'd done all the things that John could never do, and when he was old, and then when he was old, well past 30, he'd taken a glancing blow from an axe, and the wound had festered until the whole arm had to come off. Only then, crippled, had Donal Noye come to the wall, when his life was all but over. Yes, life, Noye said. A long life or a short one, that's up to you, Snow. The road you're walking, one of your brothers will slit your throat for you one night. They're not my brothers, John snapped. They hate me because I'm better than they are. No, they hate me. They hate you because you act like you're better than they are. They look at you and see a castle-bred bastard who thinks he's a lordling. The armourer leaned close. You're no lordling. Remember that. You're a Snow, not a Stark. You're a bastard and a bully. A bully? John almost choked on the word. The accusation was so unjust it took his breath away. They were the ones who came after me. 4 of them. 4 that you've humiliated in the yard. 4 who are probably afraid of you. I've watched you fight. That's not training, or it's not training with you. Put a good edge on your sword, and they'd be dead meat. You know it. I know it. They know it. You leave them nothing. You shame them. Does that make you proud? John hesitated. He did feel proud when he'd won. Why wouldn't he? But the armourer was taking that away too, making it sound as if he was doing something wrong. They're all older than me, he said defensively. Older and bigger and stronger, that's the truth. I'll wager your master at arms taught you how to fight bigger men at Winterfell, though. Who was he? Some old knight? Sir Roderick Cassile, John said wearily. There was a trap there. He felt it closing around him. Donal Noye leaned forward to John's face. Now think on this, boy. None of those others had a master at arms until Sir Alistair. Their fathers were farmers, and wagon men, and poachers, and smiths, and miners, and oars on the trading galley. What they know of fighting they learned between the decks, in the alleys of Old Town and Lannisport, in wayside brothels and taverns on the King's Road. They may have clacked a few sticks together before they came here, but I promise you, not 1 in 20 was ever was rich enough to own a real sword. His look was grim. So how do you like the taste of your victories now, Jon Snow? Or Lord Snow? Don't call me that, John said sharply, but the force had gone out of his anger. Suddenly he felt ashamed and guilty. I didn't think. Best you start thinking, Noye warned him. That, or sleep with a dagger by your bed. Go now. By the time John left the armoury, it was almost midday. The sun had broken through the clouds. He turned his back on it and lifted his eyes to the wall. Blazing blue, crystalline through the sunlight. Even after all those weeks, the sight of it still gave him the shivers. Centuries of wind-blown dirt had pocketed and scarred it, covered it in a film that often seemed pale grey, the colour of an overcast sky. But when the sun caught it, fair on a bright day, it shone, alive with light, a colossal blue-white cliff that filled up half the sky. The largest structure ever built by the hands of man, Benjen Stark had told John on the King's Road, when they had first caught sight of the wall in the distance. And beyond a doubt, the most useless, Tyrion Lannister added with a grin, but even the imp grew silent as they rode closer. You could see it from miles off, a pale blue line across the northern horizon, stretched away to the east and west and vanished in the far distance. immense and unbroken. This is the end of the world, it seemed to say. When they finally spied Castle Black, its timbered keeps and stone towers looked like nothing more than a handful of toy blocks scattered on the snow beneath the vast wall of ice. The ancient stronghold of the Black Brothers was no Winterfell, no true castle at all, lacking uh, it, walls it could not be defended, not from the south or east or west, but only from the north that concerned the Night's Watch, and to the north loomed the wall. Almost 700 feet high it stood, 3 times the height of the tallest tower in the stronghold it sheltered. His uncle said the top was wide enough for a dozen armoured knights to ride abreast. The gaunt outlines of the huge catapults and monstrous wooden cranes stood sentry up there, like the skeletons of giant birds, and amongst them walked men in black, small as ants. As he stood outside the armoury, looking up, John felt almost as overwhelmed as he had on that day in King's Road, when he'd seen it for the first time. The wall was like that. Sometimes he could almost forget that it was there, the way you forgot about the sky or the earth underfoot, but other times, when it seemed there was nothing else in the world. It was older than the Seven Kingdoms, and when he stood beneath it and looked up, it made John dizzy. He could feel the great weight of all that ice pressing down on him, as if it were going to topple, and somehow John knew that if it fell, the world fell with it. "Makes you wonder what lies beyond," a familiar voice said. John looked around. "Lannister, I didn't see, I mean, I thought I was alone." Tyrion Lannister was bundled in furs so thickly he looked like a very small bear. "There's much to be said for taking people unawares. You never know what you might learn." "You won't learn anything from me," John told him. He had seen little of the dwarf since their journey ended. As the Queen's own brother, Tyrion Lannister had been an honoured guest of the Night's Watch. The Lord Commander had given him rooms in the King's Tower, so called, although no king had visited for 100 years, and Lannister dined at Mormont's own table and spent his days riding the wall, and his nights dicing and drinking with Sir Alistair and Bowen Marsh and the other high officers. "Oh, I learn things everywhere I go." The little man gestured up at the wall with a gnarled black walking stick. "As I was saying, uh, why is it when no man builds a wall, the next man immediate when one man builds a wall, the next man immediately needs to know what's on the other side?" He cocked his head and looked at John with his curious, mismatched eyes. "You do want to know what's on the other side, don't you?" "It's nothing special," John said. He wanted to ride with Benjen Stark on his rangings deep into the mysteries of the haunted forest, wanted to fight Mance raiders, wildlings, and ward the realm against the others, but it was best not to speak of those things you wanted. "The rangers say it's woods and mountains and frozen lakes with lots of snow and ice." "And the Grumpkins and the Snarks," Tyrion said. "Let's not forget them. Lord Snow, or else, what's that big thing for?" "Don't call me Lord Snow." The dwarf lifted an eyebrow. "Would you rather be called the Imp?" "Let them see that their words cut you, and you'll never be free of the mockery. If they want to give you a name, take it, make it your own. Then they can't hurt you with it any more." He gestured with the stick. "Come, walk with me. They'll be serving some vile stew in the common hall by now. I could do with a bowl of something hot." John was hungry too, so he fell in beside Lannister and slowed his pace to match the dwarf's awkward, waddling steps. The wind was rising, and they could hear the old wooden buildings creaking around them. In the distance, a heavy shutter banging over and over, forgotten. Once there was a muffled thump as a blanket of snow slid from a roof and landed near them. "I don't see your wolf," Lannister said as they walked. chain him up in the old stables when we're training. They board all the horses in these stables now, so no one bothers him. The rest of the time, he stays with me. My sleeping cell's in the Hardin's Tower. That's the one in the broken battlement, no? Shattered stone in the yard below. And a lean-to, uh, like our noble King Robert after a long night's drinking. I thought all those buildings had been abandoned. John shrugged. No one cares where you sleep. Most of the old keeps are empty. You can pick any one you want. Once Castle Black had housed 5,000 fighting men, with all their horses and servants and weapons. Now it was home to a tenth that number, and parts of it were falling to ruin. Tyrion Lannister's laughter steamed in the cold air. I'll be sure to tell your father to arrest some more stonemasons before your tower collapses. John could taste the mockery there, but there was no denying the truth. The watch had built 19 great strongholds along the wall, but only 3 were still occupied. Eastwatch, on the grey, wind-swept shore, the Shadow Tower, hard by the mountains where the wall ended, and Castle Black between them, and at the end of the King's Road. The other keeps, long deserted, were lonely, haunted places, where cold winds whistled through black windows, and spirits of dead manned the parapets. It's better that I'm by myself, John said stubbornly. The rest of them are scared of ghosts. Wise boys, Lannister said. Then he changed the subject. The talk is, your uncle is too long away. John remembered his wish, the wish he'd wished in anger, the vision of Benjen Stark dead in the snow, and he looked away quickly. The dwarf had a way of sensing things, and John did not want him to see his guilt. He said he'd be back by my name day, he admitted. His name day had come and gone, unremarked, a fortnight past. They were looking for Sir Warmer Royce, his father's bannerman to Lord Arryn. Uncle Benjen said they might search as far as Shadow Tower. That's all the way up in the mountains. I hear a good many rangers have vanished of late, Lannister said, as they mounted the steps of the common hall. He grinned and pulled open the door. Perhaps the Grumpkins are hungry this year. Inside, the hall was immense and draughty, even with a fire roaring in its great hearth. Crows nested in the timbers of its lofty ceiling. John heard their cries overhead as he accepted a bowl of stew and a heel of black bread from the day's cooks. Gren and Toad and some of the others were seated at the bench nearest the warmth, laughing and cursing in other rough voices. John eyed them thoughtfully for a moment, then he chose a spot at the far end of the hall, well away from the other diners. Tyrion Lannister sat across from him, sniffing at a stew suspiciously. Barley, onion, carrot, he muttered. Someone should tell the cooks that turnip isn't a meat. It's mutton stew. John pulled off his gloves and warmed his hands in the steam rising from the bowl. The smell made his mouth water. Snow. He knew Alistair Thorne's voice, but there was a curious note in it that he had never heard before. He turned. The Lord Commander wants to see you. Now. For a moment, John was too frightened to move. Why would the Lord Commander want to see him? Had he heard something about Benjen? He thought wildly. He was dead. The vision had come true. Is it my uncle? He blurted. Is he returned safe? The Lord Commander's not accustomed to waiting, was Sir Alistair's reply. I am not accustomed to having my commands questioned by bastards. Tyrion Lannister swung off the bench and rose. Stop it, Thorne. You're frightening the boy. Keep out of matters that don't concern you, Lannister. You've no place here. I have a place at court, though, the dwarf said, smiling. A word in the right ear, and you'll die a sour old man before you get another boy to train. Now tell Snow why the old bear wants to see him. Is there news of his uncle? No, Sir Alistair said. It's another matter entirely. A bird arrived this morning from Winterfell with a message that concerns his brother. He corrected himself. His half-brother. Bran? John breathed, scrambling to his feet. Has something happened to Bran? Tyrion Lannister laid a hand on his arm. John, he said, I am truly sorry. John scarcely heard him. He brushed off Tyrion's hand and strode across the hall. He was running by the time he hit the doors. He raced to the commander's keep, dashing through drifts of old snow. When the guards passed him, he took the tower 2 steps at a time. By the time he burst into the presence of the Lord Commander, his boots were soaked, and John was wild-eyed and panting. Bran, he said. What does it say about Bran? Jorah Mormont, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, was a gruff old man with an immense bald head and shaggy grey beard, and a raven on his arm, and he was feeding it kernels of corn. I'm told you can read. He shook the raven off, it flapped its wings and flew to the window, where it sat watching as Mormont drew a roll of paper from his belt and handed it to John. Corn, it muttered in a raucous voice. Corn, corn. John traced the outline of the dire wolf in the white wax of the unbroken seal. He recognized Rob's hand, but the letters seemed to blur and run as he read them. He realized he was crying, and then, through tears, he found the sense of the words and raised his head. He woke up, he said. The gods gave him back. Crippled, Mormont said. I'm sorry, boy. Read the rest of the letter. He looked at the words, but they didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Bran was going to live. My brother's going to live, he told Mormont. The Lord Commander shook his head, gathering up a fistful of corn, and whistled. The raven flew to his shoulder, crying, Live, live. John ran downstairs, a smile on his face and Rob's letter in his hand. My brother is going to live, he told the guards. They exchanged a look. He ran back to the common hall, where he found Tyrion Lannister just finishing his meal. He grabbed the little man under the arms, hoisted him into the air, and spun him in a circle. Bran is going to live, he whooped. Lannister looked startled. John put him down and thrust the paper into his hands. Here, read it, he said. The others were gathering around, looking at him curiously. John noticed Gren a few feet away, a thick woolen bandage wrapped around one of his hands. He looked anxious and uncomfortable, not menacing at all. John went to him. Gren edged backwards and put his hands up. Stay away from me now, you bastard. John smiled at him. I'm sorry about your wrist. Rob used the same move on me only once. Once only with a wooden blade. It hurt like 7 hells, but yours must be worse. Look if you want. I can show you how to defend that. Aster Thorne overheard him. Lord Snow wants to take my place now, he sneered. I'd have an easier time teaching a wolf to juggle than you would than you will be training this oryx. I'll take that wager, Sir Alistair, John said. I'd love to see Ghost juggle. John heard Gren suck in a breath, shocked. Silence fell. Then Tyrion Lannister guffawed. 3 of the Black brothers joined in from a nearby table. The laughter spread up and down the benches, until even the cooks joined in. The birds stirred in their rafters, and then finally even Gren began to chuckle. Sir Alistair never took his eyes from John. As the laughter rolled around him, his face darkened, and his sword hand curled into a fist. That was a grievous error, Lord Snow, he said in the acid tones of an enemy. And that's the end of that chapter. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you soon.